Are you kidding me? Oh my god. It was reverse thread the whole time. Oh my god, oh no, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh no, oh no. Oh.